Hello everyone. In a previous video I made the claim that the Tri-omni God, that is, a God that's all-powerful, all-knowing, and all-good, or in other words, omnipotent, omniscient, and omnibenevolent, is logically incoherent. You cannot possibly have all three of those traits. I wanted to follow up on that claim in a little more detail in this video. In the prior video I think I used kind of a poor example. I said there that if God knows everything, then he knows what it's like to torture small children to death, and no one that knows what it's like can possibly be all good. While I think there's something to that point, I think there's a few possible responses to it that sort of undermine it, at least potentially. So first off, the theist could simply deny that God knows what it's like, and instead claim that what they mean when they say God is all-knowing is that he simply has all propositional knowledge, he knows all facts. I'm not sure if that would really square with the traditional understanding of omnipotence, but it's certainly a logically possible move. Alternatively, the theist could claim that God merely knowing what it's like to torture a child doesn't impugn his perfection, since knowing what something is like is not the same as actually doing it. And that last part's certainly true. It's certainly true that knowing what something is like and doing that thing are two different things. But I don't really think that's actually going to preserve God's perfection, but for the sake of argument, I'll grant the point here. What I want to focus on today is a different set of illustrations, so here goes. Well, one aspect of moral perfection has to include respecting the legitimate wishes and rights of other beings. But because God is all-knowing, there's no way that he can respect our legitimate wishes and rights. Think about the right to privacy, for example. There are some things that I want to do only when no one else is looking, and it seems like I'm morally entitled to that. George Orwell's 1984 illustrates how horrifying life would be if Big Brother were watching us all the time. But if God's all-knowing, then he is watching me all the time. He is Big Brother in more ways than one. This is why Christopher Hitchens aptly called heaven a celestial North Korea. Another tension is the fact that if God knows everything, then by necessity he must lack certain powers. For example, he must lack the power to learn something new, the power to be surprised, the power to have new experiences. If he's all good, then he can't know what it's like to make a mistake, to sincerely apologize, or to be forgiven for a mistake. But surely these are things that have to be part of being all good. So the idea of being all good itself is incoherent. Same thing's true of the idea of being all-knowing. By itself, you can set aside the other two omnis, the idea of being all-knowing is logically incoherent. If God knows everything, then he can't know what it's like to learn something new. And the same is true with the concept of being all-powerful. That concept is, on its face, incoherent. And this was established, I think, well by J.L. Mackie, who put forward what he called the paradox of omnipotence. Here it is. If God is all-powerful, does he have the power to give his power away? Can he make himself not all-powerful? Now, the immediate response to this might be, as well as some of the other objections above, well, that would be logical contradiction, and being omnipotent doesn't entail the ability to do anything. It only entails the ability to do things that are logically possible. And, well, that's fair enough, but notice what that means. It means that I have a power that God doesn't have. I can give away my power. I can delegate responsibility at work, for example, or I can give my wife the power of attorney over my life and death decisions if I end up in a coma. If I have a power that God doesn't have, then does it really make any sense to keep calling him omnipotent? Isn't the word just meaningless at that point? Well, that's all I have for now, but I think you get the idea. Once you start thinking about it, it's not hard to generate cases where one of these three attributes contradicts another one, or even itself. Now, if you're a theist, or even if you're not a theist, but you think there's some error in my reasoning, I'd love to hear about it. I certainly don't think this is the most airtight thing I've ever put forward, but I think it has some legs. But I would love to get some feedback. I would love to hear some criticism on this, so feel free to post either a text response or a video if you prefer. Thanks a lot.